It's kind of like an anticipated UFC event, is it not? Let's bring in John Yoo, UC Berkeley law professor and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President Bush 43. I may have to pause you for a second, John, because we are expecting the president to come out any moment now. But first of all, let's look ahead to the main event, as Eric Shawn was putting it, next week when Michael Cohen takes the stand. This is what Jonathan Turley said about his expected testimony earlier today on Fox. Listen here.
It's coming down to Michael Cohen. And who would base a case on Michael Cohen? It's a good thing they don't put their hands physically on the Bible anymore, because it would burst into flames. I mean, this is someone who just recently was denounced by a judge as a serial perjurer.
All right, so Michael Cohen knows an awful lot about the Trump administration. He knows a lot about these NDAs, but is he the witness that you want to pin your case on?
No, and that explains what the prosecution has been doing this week. They don't have a case on the law. They've totally concocted these charges which don't really bear on the facts of the case. They know that Michael Cohen is a perjurer and has pled to felonies. He's the worst possible witness a prosecutor will want to bring forward. So that's why they spent this week just attacking Donald Trump's character. The reason why they dragged Stormy Daniels into it, the reason why they elicited this outrageous prejudicial testimony is because they want to leave in the jury's mind this kind of vivid reality show that's going to be hard for them to forget, so that they'll want to convict Donald Trump just for being a bad man, regardless of whether he committed any crime or not. And that's why they led this first. If they really were confident, if the prosecution was confident in Michael Cohen, if they thought they had a watertight case, he would have been the first witness, not the last witness.
Well, John, let me push back on that, because I'm glad you talk about the jury, because they're the ones that matter, right? 12 jurors. I know you're a lawyer. Pretend like you're a juror in this moment right now. In the last several days here, from what you've heard, forget all the other Stormy Daniels stuff and all the other things that are attacking the former president's character. When they actually are talking about, the checks and the history and all the minutia details, as a juror, can you really believe that the former president knew exactly what he was signing when he was signing hundreds and hundreds of checks? Do you really walk away feeling like this man is responsible?
Aisha, I've always wanted to be a juror, but the judges always knock me off before I make it on. But if I try, it's true. But if I put myself in the position of a juror, what I want to see is evidence, one, that President Trump intentionally committed fraud when he listed these checks under one account versus another account. That's one thing the prosecution has yet to prove, but that's key. And then the second thing I want to see is what other law was violated, because Bragg has promised to show that he's allowed to enforce federal election law, and the reason that Trump engaged in this fraud was to affect the 2016 election. I haven't seen that yet either. So as a juror, you're right, Aisha. I'm waiting to see who signed the checks. What was Trump really thinking? What was his state of mind? I think that's really hard to prove here. And then was he doing it really not to protect his family, not to protect his reputation, but to actually try to influence the 2016 election in a state which he lost overwhelmingly?
Yeah. We should point out that the jury has been dismissed for the week. The president, former president, and his legal team and the prosecution are still in the courtroom. Apparently, they're discussing a motion in regard to a gag order. I don't know if it's the gag order or another gag order, and something about Michael Cohen as well. He is supposed to be coming out momentarily. Before I ask you another question, John, let's just watch here, because I'm told that he is on his way out. Nothing yet. Maybe it takes a little while for them to gather up their notes and everything. We should point out, well, John, you say that you've always wanted to be on a jury, but you've been knocked out because you're an attorney. There are two attorneys who are sitting on this jury. And a question that some people have is, will these attorneys try to prejudice the jury, or will these attorneys try to keep the jury in line? In terms of how to weigh the evidence, what can be considered, whether or not testimony that was struck from the record should be erased, expunged from their minds, which is a difficult thing to do. Many people have said this week that once you hear or see something, you can neither unhear it nor unsee it. The president's legal team, there's Boris Epshteyn, just coming out of the court. He's not necessarily a member of the president's legal team, but he's certainly counselor to the president. That looks like the president's head there in the window of the door as we're waiting for him to come out. John, just quickly, and we're going to have to interrupt you momentarily, speak to this idea of there being two attorneys on the jury and whether they might help steer the jury toward the absolute parameters of the judge's instructions or maybe in a different direction.
Hopefully they'll remember what they learned in first year of law school, which is the government needs to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. That doesn't mean 51% likely. That means 99% likely that the government is right. Put aside the law, put aside the facts. That's the most important thing those two lawyers can bring to the jury. Did the government not just persuade you, but are you utterly convinced that Donald Trump committed fraud, that he committed fraud in order to influence the elections, that this was not about protecting his reputation, that this was about committing some kind of violation of federal election law?